Armin, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello, I hope you stick around. Today I'm doing a book review on Darius the Grey is Not Okay by Adib Khorram, which is a YA contemporary that follows a character named Darius who is half Persian and half white as he travels to Iran for the first time to visit his dying grandfather and meets a bunch of his family that he's only ever seen through a screen, so video calls, phone calls, that sort of thing. He hasn't really directly interacted with a lot of them, and this is his first time going to Iran, so it deals a lot with themes of cultural identity and fitting in, but it also deals with depression, friendship, and all kinds of stuff, and I literally cannot say enough good things about it. Like, before I even start the review, I rated this 5 stars. I loved it. It's probably one of the best books I've read this month. Not this month. One of the best books I've read this year. Definitely love it so much. Highly recommend to anybody, but especially, obviously, Persians, Iranians, but definitely any minority or POC youth or children of immigrants especially. I don't know where I'm going with this. I highly recommend this to anybody who might be a first or second generation or even third generation immigrant and has grown up in the United States but has family in other countries. I think they would find this highly relatable. So me personally, as a person who has grown up in the United States but who has family back in India, I really found this relatable. This book made me cry several times, and it takes a little bit for books to make me cry, and usually the ones that do make me cry are the ones I love the most, so I think that says something about this. I cried a few times. And definitely there are certain books that make you feel as if you're living the story with the character, and I think that this was one of them for sure, because you really grow attached to Darius the narrator, and you kind of see the world through his eyes, and you definitely feel as if you're living it with him. Like, what he feels, you feel, and I think that says a lot about the writing and also just the story and the experience. Like, I loved it a lot. So basically, throughout the course of this novel, Darius is struggling to reconnect with his Persian identity, and also he begins to come to terms with the fact that it's okay to not be okay all the time. There's a bug in my room. I swear if it comes near me, you will know. I will scream. So this story is definitely very character-driven in that not many major events happen during the course of this novel, but that does not by any means make it a slow book. The pacing was very good, I think, in my opinion. I was hooked the entire time, but basically, more so than events, it kind of focuses on the cultural and familial experiences that the protagonist experiences. The writing was absolutely wonderful. I think you really get to know all of the characters by the time that the book is over, and even though you're seeing them through Darius's eyes, which is like a limited perspective obviously, you still get to see that all of the characters have multiple facets of their personality. Like, nobody is just strictly bad or good. Like, they may say certain things, they may act a certain way, but it all goes back to how they've been raised, what experiences they've had to make them act in that way, and it's not like they're strictly bad or good, and I think that's very important, especially when you're dealing with a group that might have been historically, like, villainized a lot. I know the author talks about that in the Q&A at the end, because whenever you think of Iran, you think of all the news stories that you might have heard, and this story really goes a long way toward humanizing a group of people that might have been villainized a lot in the past, and I think it's very important for Persian youth to see themselves represented in books as well. Darius as a narrator also has a very unique style, which at first, I'm not gonna lie, I found a bit annoying, but like literally 2 chapters in, I switched to actually really liking it and finding it a very cool way. I'm not gonna talk about like what exactly he says, because you will pick it up immediately. Like, as soon as you start reading the book, you'll be like, oh, that's what she was talking about. But I really liked it. Actually, he has a great sense of humor as a narrator, and I really loved like his little insights and stuff, and he's pretty relatable. He's kind of nerdy, and it's like fun. So moving on, this story does deal a lot with the topic of depression, because the main character Darius has been diagnosed with depression. He takes medications for it, and his dad also has depression and takes medication for it. I think they're like on the same medication, but despite this, he and his dad like don't get along very much, and he feels like his dad he feels like his dad is constantly disappointed in him and everything about him, which I will also get into later. But I think the author mentions that while a lot of the focus in a lot of books these days is on, like, whenever they're talking about mental illness, they talk about like suicide and a lot of drastic things. This one really deals with the kind of everyday lived experience of depression. Obviously, it's not going to be the same for everyone, but this is just one example of how depression can affect your everyday life. Like, it's just something that's constantly looming over him, sort of. And he describes to his friend Sorab in this book, he makes a friend, which I'll talk about later, He describes like he often gets stuck in this place where he's thinking sad thoughts and like just kind of in that rut of feeling like he doesn't belong. And he also deals with a lot of mood swings. He cries often, and he feels like all of this kind of sets him apart from people. But we are shown over the course of the book that it's okay to kind of feel things and to not be okay. Another thing I really liked is that this book deals with the difference between how depression is seen in Western cultures and how it is seen in other cultures, like for instance in Persian culture or even Indian culture, because Darius is often asked about his depression while he's in Iran, and whenever he like explains to them that his mind just kind of makes different chemicals, they're like, you know, what happened to you to make you depressed? Like, why are you so sad? Did something bad happen? It's as if like the only reason you can be sad is if something really traumatic has happened to you. And I know in a lot of cases that's true, but also in this one, he's like always feeling ashamed of himself because he's like, I know some of these people have harder lives than me and nothing really bad has happened to me. Like, my life is great compared to them, but I'm still depressed. Like, why am I depressed? You know, like, he really feels a lot of shame. And I really found this relatable because even in, like, Indian culture, it's kind of the same. Like, recognizing that mental illness is a legitimate thing, even if nothing, like, directly brought on your depression or even mental illness, anxiety, anything. It's still a process. And it's seen as kind of like overreacting, not needing medication to treat, not like a real illness. And I think it's really important to understand these cultural differences because it goes a long way toward explaining like why things are the way they are in mental health care for minorities in the US like today. And as a psychology major, I'm kind of like geeking out over this, but that's kind of like what I'm focusing on is like mental health care for minorities and POC populations, because oftentimes they come from different cultures and mental health care and mental illness is seen very differently in those cultures, and that like just makes Western notions of treatment just kind of obsolete. It's like you really have to understand the culture to be able to treat that, you know, individual. But anyways, moving on to relationships. As I said before, this book focuses a lot on the relationships that the character has with other people throughout the course of his trip. First off, obviously, like before he even goes to Iran, there is the relationship with Darius and his father, who is basically the epitome of the perfect white man, because his mom is Iranian and Persian. Sorry if I'm not saying it right, but his mom is Persian and his dad is white, and he is basically like the epitome of perfect white man. Like, he's handsome, successful, he's an architect, he has blonde hair, blue eyes, like everything is kind of like perfect about him in Darius's eyes, and it seems like he is constantly disappointed in Darius, who is like the not perfect, you know, overweight, not as successful, depressed son. So basically neither of them know how to bridge this gap that has grown between them, but over the course of their trip to Iran, they kind of learn more about each other and about themselves, and honestly, it is one of the most beautiful like relationship developments in this book. I really loved the relationship and how it progresses over like the course of the novel. So I think that is one of the best things about this book. So next, obviously, there is the dying grandfather that he is going to Iran to meet. That's the whole purpose of the trip to Iran, is that they're going to see him one last time, because his mom hasn't seen him since Darius was born, basically, and Darius has never seen him. And he hasn't obviously like had a lot of contact with him because of the distance, but also there's the language barrier, and there's also just like the personality differences. So Darius like doesn't really feel that close to his grandfather, and so when he's told that he's dying, he says, I was sorry too, but not as sorry as I should have been, and I felt kind of terrible for it. The thing is, my grandfather's presence in my life had been purely photonic up to that point. I didn't know how to be sad about him dying. And I really felt that kind of, sort of that shame, like feeling bad about not feeling bad enough. Because there have been times in my life where a family member who is technically like directly related to me, has fallen ill or has died, and I really didn't know how to react because I had only interacted with them tangentially or like barely at all. And so I saw the effect that their illness was having on the people around me, but I just couldn't like bring about the same feeling in myself, and it made me feel like I knew how I should feel, and I just wasn't able to feel that way because I didn't have that same connection with this person. And so it kind of compounded that feeling that obviously Darius has, of, you know, being alienated from your family, from your culture, not feeling like enough of a part of that group of people. So I definitely like related to that. So the next main relationship in this book is the friendship that Darius forms with Sohrab, who is one of the neighbors of his grandparents. Up until this point, Darius really didn't have any close friends, and he was kind of bullied at school, kind of stuck out, didn't really fit in. But when he meets Sohrab, they click, and Sohrab knows like exactly what to say, when to say it, when not to say anything, and like what Darius needs at any point in time. But as is often the case, the person who kind of knows you the best also knows exactly the way to hurt you the most. And I think that is really explored during the course of their relationship. And I'm not gonna say any more because I might spoil something, but basically like this relationship was just one of the best relationships in the whole book. I really loved the friendship between these two, because despite them coming from two different backgrounds, like they really kind of become really good friends, and Sora really helps Darius grow into like the person that he is and remind him that he fits in. There's a scene that I particularly loved where Darius is kind of on the outskirts again, like at a family get-together, feeling like he doesn't belong, and Sora finds him sitting there and he says, "Everyone wants you here. We have a saying in Farsi. It translates to, your place was empty. We say it when we miss somebody. Your place was empty before, but this is your family. You belong here." And I know that the feeling of like finally belonging with your family, especially when you haven't seen, especially in the context of different cultures particularly, is an amazing one, and I know like that particular scene was just like... So moving on to culture, while in Iran, Darius really struggles with his identity, not only as a fractional Persian, but also as a Persian who has been raised in the United States. There are things that he felt like he knew, like cultural traditions and stuff like that, that he thought that he knew, but then when he gets to Iran and he realizes there's so much more to it than he thought there was. And he feels this sense of alienation, of not being Persian enough whenever he's surrounded by his true Persian family. He says it a lot, he says like true Persian and fractional Persian, and he doesn't feel like a true Persian. And even compared to his younger sister, who is like the same amount Persian as him, he feels like she is more Persian than him just because she knows the language and he doesn't know the language, and she just fits in better than him. And I found this struggle incredibly relatable because as a child of Indian immigrants raised in the United States, for much of my childhood I lived in places where there were not many like Indians around or Indian Muslims around, or even my family like lived several hours away for a lot of my childhood, so I didn't really get that interaction with a lot of my extended family until much later. And so like when I eventually moved closer and I began going to more family get-togethers, I found myself kind of sitting apart from people, or like kind of watching from afar and kind of wishing I could be as involved as my other cousins or other family members had been. Despite me knowing the language, like Darius, one of the main issues is that he doesn't understand Farsi, but like I understand Hindi and Gujarati, so like the language barrier wasn't exactly the problem. It was more of just like the social cues, the familiarity that a lot of my other cousins already had with extended family members that I really didn't have. So I really felt that alienation that Darius describes so often. So I really think that a lot of immigrant children would be able to relate to this book, as I said at the beginning, because regardless of whether their experiences are directly reflected or if they're part of a different group of cultures, there are a lot of themes that are similar, because as I said, Darius is always wondering if he's Persian enough, and language is only one part of that. So I think all like immigrant children have this kind of sense, like this distance from a culture or country that we've experienced but not firsthand. It's like that one line from Clap When You Land where Yahaira says, "Can you be from a place you've never been? You can find the island stamped all over me, but what would that island find if I was there? Can you claim a home that does not know you, much less claim you as its own?" And I think like one line from Darius as well that kind of sums that up pretty well is when he's exploring this cultural site, or cultural religious site from his past. He says, "How can I be a tourist in my own past?" And I think that says a lot about the experience that a lot of children of immigrants might have when visiting countries where their families might have grown up, but that they might not have directly seen. Because like if somebody asked me who I was, like I would say I was Indian, but I've been to India, like I've been fortunate enough to visit the place that my family grew up, but at the same time, I've never lived there. I've lived in the United States. So like when I visit India, there's this sense of like, I'm surrounded by the culture and experiences of my family as they grew up, but at the same time, I know that if somebody looked at me, they would probably think I was a tourist, and I kind of feel like a tourist. So it's like, there's a sense of being a tourist in a place that you want to call home, but like, can you call it home? And I think that's really poignant, and I think that this book really like delves deep into that feeling, and I think that it's really good that people might be able to see themselves in that and see that feeling reflected in a book. Overall, I absolutely love this book. It is one of the best that I've read this year. As I said, I highly recommend it to everybody, especially children of immigrants, second-generation immigrants, anybody like that. It is amazing to finally see cultures being represented in YA, especially YA contemporaries that have been absent in the past, because it really is something else to finally see yourself represented on the page, and I think that this is like a great step in the right direction. I love this a lot, and I think everybody can benefit from reading this book, so highly recommend, 5 out of 5 stars. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting me know if you've read this book or if you plan on reading this book. I want to know, and as always, don't forget to subscribe because I will be posting new content very soon. Thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye.